What happens when country music's biggest star walks into a morning show expecting a lighthearted chat, only to walk straight into an ambush? Blake Shelton thought his Good Morning America appearance would be all smiles and small talk. Just another pit stop to promote his new tour. Instead, it turned into one of the most explosive interviews in live television history, ending with security walking him off set. If you want to see how quickly a friendly chat can spiral into primetime chaos, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Because this one gets wild. It started like any other morning at GMA's Times Square studio. Blake showed up wearing his trademark cowboy hat and that easygoing grin that's made him a fan favorite for decades. He was relaxed, expecting softball questions about life after The Voice and a few laughs with the hosts. But George Stephanopoulos had something else in mind. "Blake, welcome back to Good Morning America," George said as the cameras rolled live. "Thanks, George. Always good to be back in New York," Blake replied, adjusting his hat. Then came the first curveball. "I want to talk about your recent comments on the state of country music. Specifically, your criticism of younger artists watering down the genre. Some have called those comments out of touch, even elitist. What's your response to that?" The smile faded. Blake hadn't come prepared for this. "Well, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Country music's always evolved. I've supported new artists. But you said, and we have the audio, that today's country lacks the authenticity and grit of traditional country. You even said some of these newer artists wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real honky-tonk. That sounds pretty dismissive, doesn't it?" The tension spiked. Blake shifted in his seat. "You're taking that out of context. I wasn't attacking anyone. I was talking about the sound, not the people. So you're saying the young women and artists of color who are redefining country are just making pop with guitars?" Blake's jaw tightened. "Now hold on a second. I never mentioned race or gender. That's your spin, not mine." George didn't flinch. "But isn't it interesting that your criticism seems aimed at artists who don't fit the traditional mold of country music?" "That's completely false." Blake fired back. "I've worked with artists from all backgrounds, coached them, promoted them. I don't care what someone looks like. I care if the music's real." The studio grew dead silent. Camera operators exchanged nervous glances. Producers behind the glass whispered urgently. "I'm not accusing you of anything," George said coolly. "I'm just asking for clarity. When you say country needs to get back to its roots, what exactly does that mean?" Blake took a long breath. "Country music is about real life, about blue-collar stories and working-class values. And I worry that chasing charts and algorithms has made some of it feel shallow. So you don't think new artists are capable of that kind of authenticity?" "I didn't say that," Blake snapped. "And honestly, this feels like a setup. I came here to talk about my tour, not to be ambushed." George kept pushing. "Well, let's talk about your authenticity. You started out in honky-tonks, sure. But now you're selling out arenas, living in mansions, flying private. Doesn't that make you a little removed from the people you claim to represent?" Blake's face darkened. "I worked construction by day and played bars at night. I earned every bit of this. Are you saying I'm not allowed to succeed, that the American dream disqualifies me from making country music?" George pressed further. "I'm asking whether someone with your lifestyle can still speak for small-town America." And that's when it snapped. Blake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the studio floor. "You know what, George?" "I see what this is now," Blake Shelton said, his voice rising with disbelief. "You've decided to turn this into some kind of ambush. And I'm not about to sit here and defend my entire life and career to someone who's clearly got an agenda." "Blake, please," George Stephanopoulos replied, motioning toward the chair. "These are legitimate questions. Ones your own fans and your critics have been asking." "Legitimate?" Blake scoffed. You're basically calling me a hypocrite and a fraud on national television. That's not journalism. That's a hit job. The audience stirred, whispering nervously as the tension cut through the air. Blake was on his feet now, voice rising, hands clenched at his sides. George remained seated, calm but unflinching, a seasoned political interviewer used to confrontations. "Blake, I understand you're frustrated," he said evenly. "But every question I've asked is based on public statements you've made. I'm giving you the opportunity to clarify." "Clarify," Blake snapped. "You've been twisting everything I say, trying to paint me as some out of touch elitist. That's not clarity. That's character assassination. If you'd like to sit back down," George said, his voice steady, but now edged with steel, "we can continue this conversation like adults." Blake let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You want to talk about acting like adults. Adults don't ambush their guests with loaded questions designed to embarrass them. Adults have real conversations." The studio was silent now. Even George's co-hosts at the news desk exchanged nervous glances. Something unprecedented was unfolding live on air. "I'm going to ask you one more time," George said firmly. "Please sit down so we can finish this interview professionally." "And I'm going to tell you one more time." Blake shot back. "I'm not going to be railroaded by someone with an axe to grind." He took a step forward. "What's this really about? George, did I offend someone at the network? Did I not kiss the right rings? Is this about politics image? What?" For a moment, George's professional mask slipped. "This isn't about politics, Blake. It's about accountability. You have a platform that reaches millions. That comes with responsibility." "Responsibility?" Blake's voice cracked with disbelief. "Let me tell you about responsibility. I've been loyal to this genre for over 20 years. I've given back to communities, mentored up, and coming artists, launched careers. I've stood for something." He paused, his jaw tight. "But apparently, none of that matters because I had the nerve to say country music should stay true to its roots." George leaned in. "But whose version of those roots, the glossy, sanitized version sold by record labels, or the real roots, the ones that include voices that have long been excluded?" Blake's eyes flared. "There you go again. Putting words in my mouth. Making assumptions. You don't know a damn thing about who I've worked with, who I've supported, or what I stand for." "Then enlighten me," George said quietly. "Tell me about the diverse artists you've championed. Tell me what barriers you've helped break down." "I don't need to prove my record to you," Blake shot back. "My actions speak for themselves. If you can't see that, then you're choosing not to." George leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "You know what I find interesting for someone who says they speak for the common man? You're getting awfully defensive over some pretty straightforward questions." Blake barked a bitter laugh. "Straightforward, these questions are loaded with bias. You're twisting them into gotchas. That's what's wrong with media today. No one wants the truth. You just want the spectacle." "Are you accusing me of manufacturing this for ratings?" "I'm saying you turned what should have been a conversation about my music into a political interrogation. And the only reason I can think of is because you wanted to stir up controversy and get clicks." In the control room, producers whispered frantically. Assistants hovered just off camera. Every second of this was being broadcast live, and the stakes had never felt higher. George stood up slowly, his voice low and deliberate. "You know what I think? Blake, I think you're used to peace interviews. You're used to everyone treating you like royalty. And when someone finally holds you to your own words, you can't handle it." The Blake's face turned crimson. "You think defending the soul of country music makes me weak. That used to be called integrity, not controversy. And I think asking someone to explain their own public statements is basic journalism. Not a personal attack. Then do some basic journalism?" Blake shouted. Actually listen to what I'm saying instead of playing prosecutor. I've given you every opportunity. No. You came for a fight. George, Blake interrupted. And now you're acting shocked that I won't just sit here and take it. Nobody's fighting you, George said, finally showing a flicker of frustration. I'm asking questions, ones that millions of people want answers to. No, you're asking questions designed to trap me. No matter what I say, you'll twist it. That's the game, right? And for the first time in the interview, George's mask cracked just slightly. A trap, he said quietly. The trap of being asked to explain your own words. Silence. Then, Blake turned toward the camera's chest heaving. You want a headline here. It is Blake Shelton walked into Good Morning America and walked out still telling the truth, no matter how hard they tried to twist it. He took off his mic, handed it to a stunned production assistant, and walked off set as the audience sat frozen, unsure whether they'd just witnessed a breakdown or the most honest moment live television had seen in years. The trap of being held accountable. Blake scoffed, voice thick with anger. No. The trap of having my words twisted, pulled out of context, and shoved into whatever narrative you've decided to push this morning. He stepped forward, inching closer to George's desk, his voice dropping to a low, charged growl. I've been in this business long enough to know a setup when I see one. And right now I see one clear as day. George didn't flinch. Maybe the problem isn't the questions, Blake. Maybe the problem is that you don't like the answers you're giving. Blake stared him down, chest heaving. You know what, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't like being forced to defend myself against accusations that were never made. At least not by me. Maybe I don't like being treated like a criminal for having an opinion about music. That George didn't miss a beat. And maybe I don't like guests who play the victim the second they're asked to explain themselves. The studio was now frozen in silence. Even the hum of equipment seemed to fade under the weight of the moment. No cue cards, no laughter, no transitions, just tension. Blake straightened up, taller now, like he'd made a decision. Well then, George, I think we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what this interview was supposed to be. And since you're so interested in accountability, let me show you some. I'm done. I won't be part of this farce any longer. You're walking out. I'm walking out of this. Whatever this is. Because it sure as hell isn't an interview. It's an ambush dressed up as journalism. George's tone sharpened. So you're just going to storm off when things get a little uncomfortable. That's what standing by your convictions looks like. Blake froze, then slowly turned back around, his face now a mask of tight fury. Little uncomfortable, he said, his voice razor thin. You've spent the last 10 minutes implying I'm some kind of racist, elitist fraud. On live television. That's not uncomfortable, George. That's character assassination. I never used those words, George replied evenly. You did. You didn't have to, Blake snapped. You crafted every question to imply it. That's the trick. Ask the right questions in the right tone, and you can turn anyone into whatever villain your viewers want. George held his ground. The only thing I'm trying to hold you to, Blake, is your own words. My own words that you've twisted beyond recognition. I never attacked young artists. I never attacked women or people of color. I said I miss the authenticity in country music. You turned that into a national indictment. Inside the control room, producers scrambled. No one had planned for this. Every second of this raw, volatile exchange was going out live. If I've mischaracterized your position, George said, then use this opportunity to set the record straight. Blake let out a bitter laugh. In this environment, you think this is a safe place for truth. I've seen this playbook. No matter what I say, you'll cut it, spin it, weaponize it. The damage is already done. The only damage being done, George said firmly, is your refusal to have a real conversation about issues that matter. Blake turned on him. Matter, George. This is country music, not foreign policy. You're acting like I need to be hauled before a tribunal for saying guitars and grit used to mean something. For someone with your platform, George replied, words have weight. When you dismiss whole waves of new artists, it matters. I didn't dismiss anyone, Blake thundered. I talked about music styles, not about race, not about gender, not about anyone's worth as a human being. But you turned it into some kind of civil rights trial. Then maybe, George pressed, you need to be more mindful about how you say things. You know your words will be scrutinized. Blake's temper finally boiled over. Mindful, you mean sanitized. You mean speak in pre-approved PR slogans so no one like you can take offense, so I can't be misquoted or re-edited or turned into the villain of the week. I mean, you need to think about the impact of what you say. And about the impact of your questions? Blake shot back. What about the damage done when you ambush someone who showed up in good faith to talk about music and instead gets interrogated like they're on trial? The audience was frozen. A few had pulled out phones to record. Everyone knew this was no longer just an interview. It was a moment. No one ambushed you, George replied. Everything I've asked is based on your public statements, stripped of all context, delivered with a tone designed to provoke. That's not journalism, George. That's advocacy pretending to be journalism. George's own composure began to fray, his voice tight. And what you're doing now is deflection, Blake. Righteous indignation dressed up as moral high ground. Blake stared him down one last time. Call it whatever you want, he said. But I'd rather walk out with my dignity intact than sit here and let you rewrite my words and my character in real time. He turned, took off his mic, and left the set. The camera lingered on the empty chair. The silence spoke volumes. I'm the only one being honest here, Blake snapped, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I'm calling out what this interview actually is, a hit job. And you're hiding behind so-called journalistic ethics while carrying it out. The atmosphere had thickened. Security staff inched closer to the set, still off camera, but clearly on alert. A hit job, George repeated, incredulous. You're being asked to clarify comments that offended people in your own industry. That's not an ambush. That's accountability. No, that's manipulation, Blake shot back. You twisted my words, stripped them of context, and then framed the whole thing to look like an attack. You didn't come here to talk. You came to corner me. Into what owning your own words, George snapped, the mask finally slipping. If you can't handle scrutiny, Blake, maybe you shouldn't make public statements in the first place. Blake froze, then laughed, short bitter. There it is. The real George Stephanopoulos, not the unbiased journalist, but the gatekeeper who thinks he decides who's allowed to speak. I don't decide anything, George said sharply. The public makes up their minds, based on how you present yourself. No, based on how you present me, Blake countered. You've twisted this whole thing into a hit piece. I came here expecting a conversation. You turned it into a trial. In the control room, producers barked into their headsets. Camera ops hesitated, unsure whether to cut or keep filming. On set, the standoff escalated. You're responsible for your own reputation, George yelled now, fully losing control. Not me. My reputation is being dragged through the mud by your selective editing, not by anything I actually said. Blake began walking toward the edge of the set, but George's voice followed him like a whip. So this is how you handle criticism, you walk away. When things get uncomfortable, Blake stopped cold. Turned. His face was flushed, jaw clenched. This isn't criticism. This is a setup. This is character assassination dressed up as journalism. And no, I'm not walking away. I'm refusing to let you finish the job. George leaned forward. Then stay. Defend your character. Don't storm off like a child. That was it. Blake marched back toward the desk, finger pointing. Don't you dare call me a child. I've spent 20 years in this industry earning respect. Not through spin, not through politics, but through hard work and showing up. I don't have to prove myself to a washed-up political handler who's decided to take his personal bitterness out on country music. George's face went pale, then red. Washed-up political handler, he repeated, stunned. At least I ask tough questions instead of pandering to fans. Tough questions, Blake barked. No, these are smears disguised as questions. You didn't come here to listen. You came to convict. Security finally stepped in. A large man in a black suit approached cautiously. Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and step away from the desk. Blake turned to him livid. Are you kidding me? He's been coming after me for 15 straight minutes, and I'm the one being told to calm down, sir, please, the guard repeated, more firmly this time. George, seizing the moment, gestured to the guard. Escort Mr. Shelton off the set. This interview is over. Blake's eyes widened. You're having me thrown out after ambushing me, twisting my words, and attacking my integrity on national television. You're having me escorted like some kind of threat. The guard reached gently for Blake's arm. Blake shrugged him off but started walking. As he reached the edge of the set, he turned one last time, voice booming, "This is journalism in America now. Invite your guest, bait them with lies, push an agenda, and then throw them out when they won't play along. Roll the cameras, folks. Let the world see what you really are." And with that, Blake Shelton walked off the Good Morning America set. George remained at the desk, visibly shaken, trying to recompose himself. The studio was dead silent. Camera operators stayed locked in. Producers stared at their monitors, unsure what to do next. Seconds later, the feed abruptly cut to commercial. What began as a typical morning interview had just become one of the most jaw-dropping live television moments in recent memory. And the shockwaves were only beginning. So, what do you think? Did George cross a line with his aggressive tactics? Or was Blake Shelton simply dodging accountability? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more viral celebrity showdowns you won't see anywhere else.